Hello, welcome. I'm Olivia Mattis, greeting you on behalf of the Sousa Mendez Foundation. I'm so happy that you've joined us today. We have people who've joined us from all over the world, and it's so wonderful. The film that you saw today was called The Courage to Care, and I've been wanting for quite some time to show it to you. But the question was, well, what to present as a program in parallel with this classic, beautiful film that was made in the 1980s, narrated by the late Elie Wiesel, all about rescue across Europe. What could we present in a program? And so I reached out to the distinguished author Peter Hellman, who wrote the seminal book, Avenue of the Righteous, in the late 1970s, that was then renamed When Courage Was Stronger Than Fear. It was issued in multiple languages, multiple editions. It's such an important book. And I asked Peter to select one story, any story he would like to share with our audience that he feels encapsulates the lessons of the film and the lessons of his book. And he selected the story that you will be hearing today, the very, very moving story. So grab some tissues, be prepared to be moved. And so we have two guests. We have the author Peter Hellman, and he has himself a special guest. And so he will be introducing his guest, whose name is OMER KOTZER. He'll be telling you about him at the appropriate time and bringing him in. But right now, it's Peter's show. So Peter, please take it away.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for all you've done. And thank you most of all for creating the Sousa Mendez Foundation. When I wrote that book, Avenue of the Righteous, later with a different name, I briefly mentioned Sousa Mendez, but at that time, nobody really knew who he was, but he was a crucial person. And so thank you. So long ago, on my first visit to Israel, I wandered into Yad Vashem, the National Shoah Memorial on a Jerusalem hillside. And you were first walk down a path lined with carob trees, and under each tree is a plaque, and on it is the name of a rescuer of Jews in countries under Nazi occupation. By Nazi regulation, each of those rescuers risked death by being a rescuer. As a journalist looking for a subject for my first book, I thought, wow, what human dramas each of these trees represents. And maybe one day I could write a book on this subject. I didn't know then that no tree on the Avenue of the Righteous, as this alley of honor is called, had a story behind it that was more dramatic, more complex, more death-defying, and more multi-generational than a particular tree planted by a Polish Christian woman who had once literally felt the gun sights of two Nazi soldiers on her as she held a Jewish child that she refused to give up. This is the story of that woman and child, right up to a member of a generation that followed, and that includes my wonderful partner and friend in this event, OMER KOTZER. Little sneak hint ahead. He's related to that little infant, but you'll hear how. Here you see Leokadia Jaromirska and her child, whom she named Bogumilia, nicknamed Bagusia. She was a mother who was not a natural mother, and this was a child who was not a natural child. Perhaps I should say biological mother, biological child. And this is a story of love that transcends biology and is rooted in goodness and maternal instinct. And this is how our story begins. So just briefly, for any map people out there, I'm not really one, but here it is. The key place is actually the smallest place on this map. It's a village called Białeka, which is kind of a suburb of Warsaw, Poland, just to the north of Warsaw. And just to the north of that are two cities which were largely Jewish at the time, Ligianovo and Radzamin. Down in the lower left of your photo, you'll see an orphanage called Pietrolesi, and the two cities of Wrocław and Krakow. Wrocław is really the important one, as we'll learn. Our story, as you hear, takes place in Poland, and it begins in Ligianovo, where a child is born whom her parents named Shifra. Later, she will become Bagusia, and later she will come back to being Shifra. She's abandoned outside a convent in Białoleka. Throughout our story, Shifra and Leokadia move from town to town looking for safety, finding it briefly at the bakery in Nyapkanav, and fleeing and eventually wind up in an orphanage in Petrolesi. But we're getting ahead of the story. Here you see the parents of Shifra / Bogusia. That's Golda Yonish on the left, and her husband on the Gershon on the right. They welcomed their daughter into life on April 21st, 1941. By then, that was in Ligianovo, and it was obviously German occupied already. And they didn't have much time to be happy. In fact, the child was born in the ghetto there. The Nazis announced in early October that they ordered the deportation of all the Jews in the Ligianovo ghetto. And certain members of that community decided maybe they were going to die anyway, but they were going to jump the wall of the ghetto and run into the forest and hope that maybe they would somehow be saved. And that group included Golda and Gershon with their child. They dashed around the forest for 2 days, and Shifra was constantly crying, and they just knew they were going to be caught. They could already hear shots in the forest where other Jews had been caught and killed. And so they made a momentous decision, which is almost hard for any of us who certainly will have children to imagine. They thought, well, we probably will die, but if we leave our child, abandon our child here in the woods, maybe some kind soul, some merciful person will find the child and save her. And so they did leave Shifra near the wall of a convent in Białoleka, and as they walked away from her, they heard her crying, "Mama, Mama," and as Gershon later wrote, it seemed like each step was an eternity. After 2 days of dashing around the forest, looking for whatever help they could find, Golda and Gershon came upon a railroad work detail of Jewish slaves who would come from Warsaw. They joined in on the work detail, and that evening they slipped back with it back into the Warsaw ghetto under cover of darkness. A few months later, January 18th, 1943, Gershon Yonish is deported to Treblinka, a killing center, but he manages to jump off the train and escapes, and was soon recaptured and sent off to Auschwitz. Golda, who had been hiding in the ghetto, is found, and she is sent to the killing center of Majdanek and murdered there. In the chaos of wartime Białoleka, a different story unfolds. Leokadia Jaromirska is married to Bolek. He has been picked up by the Nazis early in the war and sent off to Auschwitz as a political prisoner, not being Jewish. And Leokadia is going to the train, walking to the train early in the morning on October 6, 1942, and she hears the sound of a child crying. She follows the sound and comes upon this little infant who is covered with a rash because it's been drizzling and raining and is hungry and crying. And in a moment of deep compassion, Leokadia decides to become an instant mother. She christens the child Bogumilia, meaning gift of God, and the nickname is Bagusia. Thus begins a bond beyond blood ties and of constant danger. Most of 1943 passes relatively uneventfully in Bialystok, but not all of it. There is a moment when there's a knock on the door, the house, and two Nazi soldiers confront Leokadia. Apparently some neighbor has snitched on her because everybody was whispering, oh, Leokadia has a Jewish child. And they see Leokadia with the child in her arms, and they say, we want the child, give us the child. And Leokadia says, if you take the child, you will take me. And whatever you do to the child, you will also do to me. The soldiers say, very well, madam. And they take her around the back of her house to a low stone wall, which I have seen. And they raise their rifles. Leokadia makes one last plea to the soldiers. Please shoot me first so that I don't have to see you shoot my baby. One soldier turns to the other and says in German, this must be a real mother. Who else would say that? And they lower their guns and they leave. By September 1944, with Russian forces closing in, local residents, including Leokadia and Bagusia, and a caregiver named Irena, flee from the battle zone. There you see Irena. They nicknamed her Irka. After much wandering, Leokadia finds work in a German bakery. It's an army bakery. And here you see, indeed, Irka, as they nicknamed her, with this adorable child who clearly has fat cheeks and a little dog. We don't know who that dog is. Bagusia works in the bakery. And she later recalled, I worked 12 hours a day in the warm bakery. The food was ample and the child was beside me. Christmas 1944. This brings a touching and really, in a certain sense, crazy moment when the bakery's commandant hosts a Christmas party where he reads a poem that he has composed for Bagusia and offers her gifts. Leokadia, who is standing to the side, thinks to herself, if only he knew the child's origin. The end of the child. When I see this photo of Bagusia, I just think of all the travails that she went through in the war, and yet you see this radiant smile, and that's the smile of a daughter who knows she is loved. The bakery job goes well until, once again, the Russians advancing from the east approach, and the bakery, which was once a refuge, becomes a casualty. And the Germans, as well as the workers, including Leokadia and Bagusia and Irka, they have to flee again. And mostly over the coming days and weeks, they just find barns that are offered to them by peasants to sleep in at night. Leokadia remembers at 1 a.m. at one of these barns, a goat started to pee on us. It peed right on our heads. Welcome to wartime. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more what happens here. On January 19th, 1945, Bagusia with her mother embark on a final wartime journey. They cross the frozen Vistula River from Warsaw to Praga. And Warsaw at this point has just been liberated. And they reach the home of Bolek's sister. And there they are met with devastating news. Their village of Bialyleka has been obliterated down to the last stone. Whoever was left in the village was killed. Then things seemed to be peaceful for a while, a few months, but then in late summer of 1945, there's a knock on the door, and Leokadia goes to the door and sees her husband, Bolek. He has emerged from the horrors of Auschwitz, a mere shell of his former self. She's stunned by his appearance. No hair, no teeth, ravaged by disease, emaciated by hunger, and she struggles to comprehend what she sees. But amidst her fears, Bolek offers reassuring words. "Stop crying," he said. "I am here." On September 27th, 1945, there's another knock at the door. And Leokadia opens the door and sees a stranger whose gaze lingers on the child. And he doesn't say anything, he just finally departs. But Leokadia's intuition screams the truth. This was Bogusia's real father. When he returns the next day with a friend, he does indeed announce that this is his daughter. And as Bolek was waiting for trying to survive to come back to Leokadia, Gershon was trying to survive to come back to find his daughter. And when Leokadia realizes the situation, her anguish pours forth. "If I had known you were alive, I would never have picked up the child," she tells Gershon. Gershon vows not to force his daughter to be with him. She needs time to know him and trust him. So now the quartet, Leokadia, Bolek, Gershon, and Shifra/Bogusia, relocate westward to Wrocław, where Gershon's underground dealings sustain them as a black marketeer. There in the west of Poland, there was a lot of active black market. And you see two smiling people, albeit with many difficulties ahead of them. There's Gershon on the right, and you know who's on the left. Gershon tells Leokadia he plans to take his daughter to Palestine. He invites her to join them, not as his wife, but a member of the household when he remarries. As Leokadia later recalled, "If not for Bolek, I would have given it a lot of thought, but how could I leave such a man? His belief in me had kept him alive for 5 years at Auschwitz." Leokadia writes to Pope Pius XII for guidance. The answer comes back. The child must be returned to its real father. So here we are at the orphanage in Pietrolesi. This is Poland, 1946, the extreme west of Poland near Czechoslovakia. Gershon is trying to earn a living, and so he has to leave her at this orphanage in Pietrolesi. And she is in the care here. In this photo, you see of a member of the staff there named Hella Ackerman, young Jewish woman. And you see also, again, they're happy with each other. Seems like Bogusia, whoever she's with, she makes that person happy. So Gershon has left her there, and Leokadia hasn't been told where Gershon has left the child, but he comes to her house one day and he's asleep, taking a nap. She looks in his pocket of his coat and she sees a return ticket to this place, Pietrolesi. So she herself sets out to find her child. And she does find the child, and Leokadia writes, "I tried to make her understand 100 times that no matter how much I loved her, she must go with her father. Finally, when she saw it would not change, she said, 'I will kill that Gershon with an axe.' I told her she must never, ever say that or even think that. Then I will commit suicide, she said. And how will you do that? Leokadia asked. It turned out she had a little locket around her neck, and in that locket was a small picture of herself with her mom. And she had been told not to put it in her mouth because it was a kind of a metal that was poisonous. So she said, I'll swallow the locket. Here we see 1, 2, 3, fourth from the left, Shifra Ivri in a group of orphans at the orphanage. And it's interesting to see here, for the first time, you don't see Shifra smiling. Don't see her smiling. Now time came for the final departure. This is Leokadia speaking. I went with Bolek. Before, Bagusia had been calm. Now I heard her calling after me in a voice of despair. I hear her crying now. When Irena saw me, she made the sign of the cross. My hair had turned white. So that's as far as I'm going to take this story. Now you will hear from the person who is most fit to continue it, Omer. And I just have to say here, there couldn't be a more wonderful son than Omer. He's even as wonderful as my son, Jacob, but that's another story. So Omer, I met you quite a few years ago. And most recently, I went to Israel in January of this year to visit a few very important friends, show the flag in these terrible times. And it was Omer who picked me up at Ben Gurion Airport, took me to the kibbutz, and for the first time in decades, I saw the lovely, lovely face of his mom, Shifra. Okay, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Peter. It's fascinating hearing you telling the story. And we can go on with the deck and start part 2. My grandpa and my mom arriving to Israel, making Aliyah in late 48. And about a year later, my grandpa getting married with Leah. And Leah is also a Holocaust refugee with her son, Aaron. And now, for the second time, my mom in sort of a new family, a new life, new country, with 2 parents, and everything seems to be just fine. But underneath the surface, my mom is feeling that something is missing. The relationship between her and my grandpa was not so rosy, and she still had a lot of resentment to him for taking her from her mom. And she was looking for something else. A few years go by. They relocate and find themselves in Tel Aviv. And one summer, she go up north to visit her cousins in Kibbutz Shar HaGolan. So this is her as a teenager. And moving on, this is Chaim Bagam from Rod Zamin, her cousin, and his wife, Bella. And she visits them during the summer. And right off the bat, she decides to stay there and not go back to Tel Aviv. And starting a new chapter and making a big choice for herself. In Kibbutz Shar HaGolan, she's joining a peers, a group called Oren, which are assembled from teens from basically Holocaust refugees and immigrants from the Arab countries, Jewish immigrants. And she's starting a new life, and she become happy again. We can move on. Peter, I think you can tell this story better than me.
Gershon had told both his daughter and Leokadia that once she went to Israel, she had to start a new life, and she shouldn't they shouldn't write to each other. That Shifra had to begin her new life. She had to leave the past behind. Leokadia was about to have a serious operation, and she didn't know if she would survive. So she violated the agreement, which she wasn't very agreeing with, and she wrote a letter to her daughter, and really wondered, did her daughter even remember her? Would she write back? Because she was really just a small child when she was forced to leave with her father. And a letter did come back in which Shifra told Leokadia all about her life on the kibbutz, all about her life in Israel. And at the end of this letter, I hope I can read it all here, she writes, "Dear mother, I think about you often. Suddenly, I see you bend over me and kiss me with a mother's care. Nothing could make me ever forget you. I would like for you to write me often. I would like to see you with my own eyes. I send you a daughter's kisses. Your loving daughter, Bakusia Shifra." And that letter just sent Leokadia flying to the stars. Once she got it, flying to the stars.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so moving on with the story. My mom joins the army, like every young person in Israel at this time and nowadays. And she spent 2 years in the military, and then she returned to the kibbutz and meet my father, and they get married in 1960. My father, Yoram Kotzer, is a kibbutznik. He was born and grew up in the kibbutz. His parents came from Europe in late 20s, from Poland and from Czech. And the two of them start a family. My older brother, Yuval, was born in 1961, in October of 1961. And then a year and a half later, here is Ronen. He was born in 63. And finally, I get to the picture in 1965, and here we are, a happy family in Kibbutz Sha'ar Golan. You see in the background the Golan Heights, and we are right by the border with Jordan and very close to the Syrian, which obviously at this time were on the Golan Heights. And life were pretty good for us at this time, but my father's curiosity starts to grow where he was missing out details that my mom's could not fill in about her childhood. So he's reaching out to my grandpa and get Leokadia's address and write her a letter with the help of a kibbutz member who translated to Polish. And that was a beginning of 12 powerful letters between the two of them about my mom's childhood. That letter, that series of letters, Peter found in Yad Vashem, and that was the beginning of his journey. During this time, my father had a dream to bring Leokadia to Israel for a visit. And keep in mind, in those days, Israel and Poland did not even have a relationship. And then later on in 1967, my father was drafted as a reservist to the Six-Day War. He fought in the Golan Heights, and later on in the aftermath of that war, he was drafted to an area north of Jerusalem, where as a tank commander, he was shot and killed at the age of 30. So here we are, you know, young family. My mom just built her second home, and the whole thing collapsed at once, and a big tragedy, obviously. That was a low moment for all of us. You know, I don't have many memories from him because I was, sorry, so young, but I've heard a lot from stories from my mom, from my older siblings. However, my father's wish came true, and in 1969, Leokadia came on board. That was a big operation to bring her over to Israel for a visit. You see her with me, hugging me, and my brother Ronen. And in 1968, a year earlier, she was recognized as the righteous among nations by Yad Vashem. And when she came to Israel, she went there and planted a tree. We can roll on, we can move on. Here is a picture with the three of us and my mom and Leokadia, and you can see, and I still remember her visit. I was only 4 years old, but felt the warmth and the love from her throughout the visit. We can go on. So our neighbor, just newly divorced, Adam, a childhood friend of my father, and my mom just fell in love and started a new family, a new chapter. So 10 years later, here is my mom in chapter 2 of her life with Adam, getting married in 1970. And here we are, the new Kotzer and Ivri family. You can see from the left, Yuval, Ronen, Itai. Now I have an older brother, a new older brother, Itai, Adam's son from his marriage, and myself on the right. And moving on, the two of them, have a child, Alon. My younger brother was born in 1971. And after Alon, my mom felt that her dream to have a baby girl must come true as well. And sure enough, in 1976, my sister Zehuvit was born, and she was named after my grandma, Zehava, Golda Zehava in Hebrew, and Zehuvit is a modern take on that name. So here we are again, the happy extended family of Kotzer and Ivri. We can roll on with the deck. So standing from the left is Ronen, Itai, Yuval, and then sitting there with the wheel is myself and my mom with Zehuvit and Adam with Alon. And here we are, here we are, a happy and united family, and from there on, just being together. Okay, so in 1971, a stranger came on board, and Peter, I let you tell the story.
So I wanted to meet two crucial people. I wanted to meet Leokadia, and I did go to Poland, and I did meet her, and luckily had a wonderful translator. We spent hours talking about the wartime days and her beloved Bogusia. And then I went on from Poland to Israel. In those days, you just couldn't reach people in the kibbutz on a phone. Now everybody has a phone, of course, in their room, and plus their cell phones. But at that time, it was difficult. So I decided, okay, I'm just gonna take a bus to near as I can get to the kibbutz, Shar Golan, and I'll go find Shifra. So I did that. I walked a half mile in from where the bus let me off, and I said to the first person who spoke English, could you point me to Shifra? And so I met her. She was as calm as she could be when she met me. She was just welcoming, everything you would want from a stranger. And also I learned out she was a great baker. So that was important. Got a lot of good cakes and cookies that she baked. It was a wonderful moment, and I was able to get so much more to enrich the chapter on her in the book. So there you see, that's the paperback version of Avenue of the Righteous. That was the first title. And a later publisher republished it and renamed it When Courage Was Stronger Than Fear. I think that maybe was a more evocative title than the first title.
Great, and here is the extended family. On the left is Jacob, Adam's younger brother, and on the right is Ethan, Adam's older brother, and Adam is in the middle. And you can see in front of my mom is my grandpa Gershon, and Zehuvit next to him, Ronen, and Alon, my brothers, are behind my mom. And in front of Adam is his mom, my grandma, Miriam Roth. And you can see us, big, happy family, all smiling, all happy, and kind of a nice and unobvious, family. Okay, we can move on to the
Before you
next
move
slide.
on, I just have to say what I always think when I see that photo, which is, if not for that spot decision on a rainy morning near the little village in Poland, this enormous family would not exist in this way. And that's all
Absolutely.
because of that decision by Leokadia.
And my grandparents. Okay, so in 94, my mom returns to Poland for the first time after leaving Poland in 48, and meets Irka. This is her, hug in the airport. And they go visit the sites. We can move on. This is the convent. And the people here from the left is Chaim and Bella, the cousins, Adam and my mom, and Zehuvit and Irka, all standing in the place where my mom was left. This is my mom and my sister hugging in Majdanek, where my grandma was killed. And moving on to the next. Here is a visit of Irka in year 2000 in Yad Vashem. Irka and my mom are standing next to the tree that Leokadia planted in 1969. And that was another circle that was closed. Let's move on. And finally, and let's stay on that photo. This is a photo from exactly 3 years ago. That was my mom's 80th birthday. And from the left is Ronit, my wife, my mom, Zehuvit, my sister, and little Dana, their youngest grandchild out of 14 grandchildren. So we are 5 boys, Zehuvit, 14 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. And this is in Itai and Roi's home in Karkur, her birthday. And now, 3 years later, exactly, today we're celebrating my mom's 83 birthday. She's 83 today. So very exciting day and very special event here for all of us today.
Well, we're very happy to be able to do this on her birthday, and happy birthday, Shifra, from all of us, of course. So now I'm going to ask the audience to continue putting their questions into the chat box. There are some wonderful questions in there already. This is your opportunity to continue putting in those questions. And right now I'm going to make a few announcements about what we have upcoming at the Sousa Mendes Foundation, and then we will go to your questions. So of course, tomorrow's Pesach, and we wish everybody a wonderful Pesach. We will resume in May. We have 2 programs in May, May 5th and May 19th. So on May 5th, we are telling a totally different history. We're looking at a woman, her name is Jeannie Milgram. She lives in Florida, and she is an unbelievably virtuosic genealogist. She was raised Catholic, born Catholic in Havana, Cuba, but she has traced her Jewish genealogy 22 generations back to pre-Inquisition Spain and Portugal. She's reclaimed her Jewish identity and today is an Orthodox Jew. And she helps other conversos or people who had to convert because of the Inquisition to reclaim their Jewish identity. And her story is a remarkable one. So that's going to be on May 5th, and I encourage all of you to sign up. May 19th, we come back to World War II, and there we're telling the little-known story of the Jewish resistance in North Africa, in Algeria, in something called Operation Torch. So we're showing a new film. It's called Shadows of Freedom, and we're going to show you a little trailer. We do have sponsor tickets available for that program on May 19th, thanks to the generosity of Mimi and Marvin Sandler in our audience. So thank you to the Sandler couple. It's a limited number of sponsored tickets, so if you want one, please let us know as soon as you can. And right now, we're going to watch the trailer for the film Shadows of Freedom, which is the basis of our May 19th program.
Algiers actually had an impact on the war effort. Indeed, it's the only Jewish resistance movement that really had an impact on the war effort and in the process saved American lives.
There were supposed to be about 800 or so insurgents show up for the uprising. Only a few hundred showed up. They went through with their plan anyway.
Of the 388, 315 were Jewish. Abu Khair was the local leader of the Jewish resistance movement at the time, about 20 years old.
Pour des raisons évidentes, pour eux, la lutte contre Hitler était une lutte pour la vie.
It was the first large joint operation between the Americans and the British, even though they didn't see eye to eye.
Roosevelt knows we have to fight the Germans and the Italians somewhere in 1942. We have to have a success when we go after them. North Africa is the place to do it.
Fewer than 400 people took the entire city of Algiers and kept it under their control.
It was a massive operation behind the scenes.
The most important piece of territory in the European theater of war at that moment.
It was a dramatic movement of resistance, and it was a statement.
Operation Torch is the longest invasion ever mounted in the history of the world.
It was absolutely crucial to the outcome of the war.
So that's a story of Jewish resistance that actually changed the outcome of the war. That's quite remarkable. And you will be getting an email later today after the program with information on how to sign up for these programs. So now let's turn to your questions. So one question is, how in the world did Gershon find Bogusha? That was her name. I mean, how did he know where to look for her? How did he find her? Isn't there a story about a fortune teller? I mean, what is the story?
Yeah, I'll take it. And Peter, you can fill in. So first of all, after the war, my grandpa decided to go to Israel, and then he take the train, go to like a camp near Rome, where the Jews were kind of gathered to go to Israel, to go on the boat from Naples. And a storyteller read his hand and tell him, a small soul is waiting for you. The moment he hears that, he already at that point know that he lost his wife, he lost my grandma. He returns to Poland and start to search for my mom. And keep in mind, they already moved at least twice from their original location, from the area where he left them. So that was not a simple endeavor, but with the help of Jewish organizations that were helping in such instances there, he manages at the end, after a few long months, to find her.
Wow, it's unbelievable. And then sort of the converse, which is, how did Leokadia know where to find Shifra at the kibbutz? How did she know where to write to her?
So Peter, do you know how she,
Well, as a condition of, I mean, your grandfather was as kind and as he could be, knowing that he was going to take this child, which was cruel toward Leokadia. So he said, I promise I will write to you with all the information about the growth of your daughter. And he kept that promise. So he was writing regularly and also sending parcels and sending money to Leokadia and Bolek, which, you know, was a terrible time in Poland, and they had very little. So there was constant contact is the answer. So that's how he knew.
Okay, okay. And there's a question about Leokadia's hair turning white, which makes me think of our own story, the Sousa Mendes story. There's this famous story that when Sousa Mendes made the decision to save all those lives, that his hair suddenly turned white. And so it's sort of biblical. It adds this very mystical aspect to both of these stories. Is that true? And what can you tell us about that?
I can't tell you anything except I believe that it happened, and I have heard of other cases where somehow, for whatever reason, somebody's in a crisis, somebody's hair turns white. So I just think we have to take it as truth. Why it happened, that's for some hair specialist to tell you.
So we need the audience members to put in more questions. We've sort of run out of audience questions. I did want to make what I think is an important point, and that is that it took two mothers to save Shifra. Of course, Leokadia gets all the credit for finding this child and keeping her safe and keeping her alive and loving her. But without that action taken by Golda and Gershon, there would have been no story. So it's the two mothers who saved her together, I think.
Absolutely, and another credit, Irka deserves, because there were long days where she stayed with my mom and took care of her, and she was a young girl, a young teenage, with a big heart, and we had good, good memories from her visit, and my mom and my grandpa supports her as well until her last day. So.
And there is a question about that, and of course that's a crucial question. So what happened to Leokadia? I mean, Peter, when you met her and interviewed her, you said she was brokenhearted. Tell us about Leokadia and what happened to her.
Well, by her own letters, she was indeed broken by the loss of her daughter, and she did not recover from that, even though finally she had this wonderful trip to Israel, to the kibbutz. So she actually did adopt another daughter after the loss of Bagusia, Shifra. But she always said that daughter was kind of just, it didn't mean the same to her anymore. She couldn't make the connection she had to Bagusia. So there was nothing in her life that was really there to make her happy anymore. And she just felt this loss. And you see from her letters, just to go back to the beginning, as Omer says, his father wrote to Leokadia saying, "I'd like to know the history of my wife in the wartime period with you." And she writes back a first letter and says, "Well, luckily I had a little injury in the factory, the sock factory where I worked, so I have about 2 weeks when I can sit down and write you letters." And she says, listen to this, "Unfortunately, I don't have the gift for writing, but I'll do my best." Well, she had an enormous gift for writing beautiful, humane, dramatic, truthful letters about this life that they had together. And indeed, they were so powerful, those letters, that they were published in an Israeli kind of historical journal called Moreshet. And they're just remarkable letters.
So Omer, a question for you. Have you visited Poland and seen where your mother was born?
I actually haven't. It's on the plans, I do have plans for it, but it's kind of a hard thing to do emotionally. So I'm waiting for, a good reason to do that. But yes, one day it will happen for sure.
And where is Shifra celebrating her birthday today? People want to know.
So they just returned from a restaurant and they are here. Here is my mom. Ima, can you say something just so we will hear you? Let me unmute you for a second. Or Olivia, can you help me with that?
So in the
Yeah.
meantime, can somebody speak more about Irka? What happened to Irka?
So Irka actually died about maybe 10 years ago or even a little less. And she never got married. She lived on her own and she had a small family. And my mom actually in very close touch with a friend of her, a relative of her rather, that Anna, that took great care of her throughout the years. And Anna was visiting us in Israel and yeah, they're very close together. I think anybody that met my mom, and you can see in the photos, my mom, if I have to describe her, she's in the center of a big circle of love of so many people. And she's a connector. She knows how to reach people and how to lift them up and how to cheerful them. And she's, until this day, such an important person for all of us and for anybody who knows her. And you know, my grandpa always said that when she was born, he said that she was born on a lucky day. You know, imagine in Lignova, in the ghetto in 1941. That was not so happy days. And yet she made it. And with all of the crises that she faced in her life, she always managed to continue and to move on and to heal with love and with connection.
So Peter, tell us the meaning of the story for you. Why did you select this story and what do you think we can learn from it?
Well, in a sense, there's almost nothing, any one thing I can say, but one thing that does occur to me, which is both central and peripheral to this story, is there's a tendency to say, oh, the Poles, many Jews will say the Poles were terrible to the Jews. Some will even say the Poles were worse than the Germans. But in fact, on the Avenue of the Righteous, which country has the most number of righteous persons who were very severely selected? It's a tough process to get this title of the righteous. And the answer is Poland. There are more Polish persons, non-Jews, than any other nationality, more even than Dutch. Some people think, oh, it's the Dutch or whatever, but no, it's it's Poles. So while I don't want to in any way minimize terrible things that happened, we see from this little circle around around this child, from Irka to obviously Leokadia, that there were people who were just the best of people and most helpful to the Jews among them in this case.
Wonderful. Well, I think I speak for all of us saying happy birthday to Shifra Bogusha. We're glad you're here. We're glad your wonderful big family is here.
Hi, Shifra.
Thank you to Peter for writing really a remarkable book. And I'm so sorry it's no longer in print. I wish that everybody could go out and buy it, but it is no longer in print. And so let's maybe talk about how we can get it back into print. Omer, thanks for the loving care with which you put together this PowerPoint with Peter. And thank you to our audience. Have a wonderful Pesach. We will see you in May for our programs then. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.